Hi guys, and welcome back. So this week we've had a little request again for some bad lies, especially kind of chip shots and what to do around the green. This is a little stinker that I think you can probably appreciate. So that's our lie, what we're going to do out of there. There is a few little tips. It's just kind of unlucky generally, and this is a little bit about kind of feeling control in some respects, but there are a few little tips that you can do to help yourself along. The first thing I would say with this horrid little lie, we've got no green to work with, so it's a nasty little shot. We can't really do the explosion shot. We're going to try and just bump it onto the front edge and run it up. It's the only thing we can do. Again, I'm going to use my 60 degree for this shot, like I do around with all my shots. And for this one, the key more than anything, because I can see kind of just about the back of the ball, but when the club sits there, it's not very inviting. It's not very inviting, is it? Because you've got your bounce on the bottom as well, so there is a chance you might knife this one, which is not what we want. So what I suggest is, I'll try and get this set up right. We're going to try and, when we set up to the ball, we're going to have our hands very upright, so we've got the toe of the ball sticking down into the bottom of the back of the ball. So it's a little bit different. We're going to try and keep our hands high so the toe sticks down so I can get to that little base of the ball. Here we go, let's see how we can get on. Same kind of stance, no worries there. I'm just going to set up square, but I'm going to get my hands very high so the toe is going to stick in. Think DeChambeau. Okay, so we can go down the grip a little bit so that toe section is going to stick into the base of the floor behind the ball. It should just pop out up in the air. As long as that toe goes down into the back of the ball. Oh, he's only gone and hold it. Well, they don't always come out that good, but as you can see, the toe of the ball was nicely into the base behind, digging it out, and there it is. I'll take that one. Thanks for the request, and any other problem shots you want me to do, put a little note down below, and I'll get round to doing them. But that's my main tip for that one, is getting your hands high, the toe in under the ball, with the heel being off the ground a little bit and the toe sticking down in, there's much less chance of that knife shot that we don't want, where it bounces off the side of that divot and knifes the ball. That's the last one we want. To be honest, if you leave it a little bit short, it's not too bad. You just don't want one fizzing one across the green. Hopefully that helps. Try that next time you get a bad lie, but hopefully you don't get any bad lies. I've had a question from Mark Fernley, and Mark asked about some tips on bounce. Kind of what it does and what the different aspects of different wedges for different courses, etc. So I'm going to run through some of those things really quickly with you guys now, because it's a confusing subject, and if you're new to the game, or maybe you've just never looked into it, there are things that can help you, and there's a few myths and things that probably a little bit sales pitchy. The bounce on our wedges is kind of a strange subject, because there's an awful lot of variations and a lot of confusing stuff that we need to cut through before we get to the nitty-gritty of how it can possibly help you, and how you might have picked up a second-hand wedge and it might be the wrong one for you. But we'll have a look at a few of those things, and as ever I like to make things really simple. So what is bounce? It sticks out lower than the leading edge of the wedge. Can you see it sticks down there? Now this one has got 8 degrees of bounce on it, and I would say that's about standard. Anywhere between 7 and 10 degrees is about standard. Every club has a little bit of bounce on it from your 3-iron right through, and kind of generally speaking, you know, if you have a 5-iron, you've got 5 degrees bounce, 6 is 6 degrees, 7 up to 9, which is 9 degrees, and then we get into our wedges, and that's when it all seems to go a bit weird. Now my belief is just pick a standard bounce. We're talking about very small margins, but it does make a bit of a difference, because you can imagine if you're playing off of a very bare lie and that bottom edge is hitting the ground, which is hard, it's a hard packed lie, first that leading edge is going to hit a little bit up the golf ball, isn't it? It's not going to dig into the ground, because that bounce is meant to stop the club from digging in too much, because we don't really want too big a divot at any particular point, especially with wedges. And so if you can imagine that bottom edge is digging into the bottom of the ground there, you can bounce off of that bottom up into the golf ball and it effectively knife the ball. So the way I've always looked at it is, like years ago, we never really played with various different bounces. We would kind of try and develop our swing, our technique to suit the situations. Because if I've got a load of bounce on this club and I hold my hands forward, the bounce is never going to get offered to the floor. And so what we would end up doing is you get a bit of a hard line. You don't want to bounce off that bottom, that little blade there, and it knife the golf ball. So we would just hold our hands a little bit forward and we would just make sure we hit the ball first and keep our hands ahead of the golf ball. Now that's nice if you've got a fair amount of skill of what you're doing. But what we're often trying to do is make a very consistent shot all the time. Try and do the same swing for everything we play, and that's where these bounces come in. But I'm saying that if you get a bounce between 7 and 10 degrees, I would go for I've got 8, so 8 is kind of right in the middle. It's pretty good for all angles. I would recommend everybody to go for just something in the middle. Why try and go for an extreme? Even if you're playing at a links course and the ground's very tight, 8 degrees of bounce is absolutely fine. Why would you want to go towards 4 or 5 degrees bounce when later on in the round you might need a bit of bounce? You might have a decent lie that you actually want to just clip it off the top of. Okay, so look at the state of this lie. It's horrible. It's sat in the divot that I've just been from, and I've got my regular bounce 60-degree club. All we've got to do is play it. I kind of like to play it just slightly back in my stance a bit. Not too much wrist break, just keep it nice, just from there to there. And it comes out absolutely fine. I would suggest rather than changing your bounce or changing your club, I'm always suggesting that you change your technique slightly or to try and improve your technique. Because with the right technique, bounce really is quite irrelevant. So I'm always going for a very shallow arc. Okay, with very little wrist break. Now, wrist break is always where the trouble comes in. Because obviously what we're trying to do is get our club back to this position when we hit the golf ball. Now, if we take our club back like this, then suddenly we've got that factor to add to our chip. So it's always going to be better, a little bit like a putt, it's always going to be better to have very little wrist break on it. We don't need any wrist break. We just use the loft on the club to make the ball go higher. And so working from here, I've got my 60 degree here. Now this is just a standard kind of bare lie. I'm just going to hold up to the ball and I'm going to try not to get too much wrist break involved. Now this will hardly use the bounce whatsoever. And that must just come off the top nicely. In my mind, I would always go for a standard bounce. Then you can open a club face up if you like. We can always close the club face, but you do get that option of open it, which you don't get if you've got loads of bounce on it. Because lots of bounce, open the club face, it lifts that leading edge, and you're talking knife every single time, especially when the ground's very, very hard. So just be aware when you're playing links golf and you get a very, very tight lie, I'm always thinking less wrist cock, and if the lie's very, very tight, always just try and sweep it through, holding your hands just slightly ahead of the ball, and you'll get a lovely clipped strike like that. One other thing that I actually quite like doing is when we're talking about sweeping the shot and hitting it a little bit lower and trying to do our nice kind of sweeping chip motion, I always make my right grip just a little bit stronger than I have in previous shots. I just get it round this way a little bit more, not too much, just a little bit, and it just promotes that nice into, out and soft shallow. So if I exaggerated it and I was like this, it's very shallow. And it just kind of, for me, it just kind of helps because when I get my normal grip over this way, it kind of makes me almost attack into it a little bit more and kind of hit one of those nippy spinners, which you kind of don't really want when you've got a very tight lie. We're just trying to keep it nice and shallow, and trying to clip that ball off each time as best we can. I've got 4 balls. I love these little shots. Just a simple chip shot. Got a little bump there, but that's no problem for us. It's raining, but other than that, I'm expecting to hole one of these 4. I'll be disappointed if I don't. Let's see what we can do. So feet quite close together, nice and shallow. I make sure I keep my right hand a little bit stronger, so a little bit further to the right, just to help me maintain that shallowness. See how we get on. It's close enough. Close enough, forgive me. That's a good one. Second ball. Yes. Okay, so let's go for 2. Let's try and hold 2 now. Same shot. Not too much movement. That was in as well. Go on. Go on. Not quite. Now with the brake on this, I'm not sure I can hold this one, but we'll see. So I've got my feet quite close together. Everything's quite neutral. Nice and shallow, not too much of a wrist cock. And the thing is with those shots is you want to sort of set your sights very high on every shot that you have. You want to believe that you can do it, and you want to believe that you can hold the shot, because then when you hit a bad shot, like for instance, if I'd have hit a disappointing one there, it would have been probably 2 feet, which is still quite a good shot. And then you've still got this chance of freely flowing through it thinking you're going to hold it, and it's absolutely crucial. I can't say enough about that. It really is an incredible part of the mental game, is to like overestimate what you can do as far as chip shots are concerned. I mean, we're playing within ourselves at the same time. You know, we're going to look at all the options. Obviously we're not going to go for a bare-lied flop shot and think we're going to hold it. Obviously we're going to kind of manage what actually is humanly possible and what the consequences are. But if it's a simple chip shot, yeah, I mean, why shouldn't you hold it? It's not like you've got to hit it 350 yards, and maybe you've never done that. You know, with a chip shot, there's always that chance of it going in, just getting it online and it going in. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next week.